All right, guys. The next guest is the bee's knees when it comes to combat sports analysis, with some of the sharpest breakdowns around, stinging everybody with his excellent work on BT Sports, Full Reptile, and now PFL Europe. He's here to preview UFC 288 and just catch up with the boys, the one and only Dan Hardy. Welcome back to Submission Radio, your official home, of course, here in Australia. It's good to have you, man.
Always good to be here, guys. I hope you're well.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Hey, before we get into UFC 288, dude, how about BKFC yesterday? What a wild event. Just super quick detour. Eddie Alvarez retiring Chad Mendes. Conor McGregor, after all these years, basically coaching both guys during their fight. Mike Perry beating Rockhold, the much bigger Rockhold, then facing off with Conor. It was like a tribute show to 2014 to 16 MMA. All they needed was like some Reebok gear to complete everything. What was your favorite part, man?
I think probably Conor being there, being so animated. I mean, he's like a moth to a flame, isn't he? No matter where the attention is, he's going to be right front and center doing shots of proper 12. I've not watched the full fight of Mendes against Alvarez yet, but I will make sure I check that out. But as far as Perry and Rockhold, I mean, it didn't really surprise me, to be honest. Like, you think back to what Perry did to MVP. MVP's got amazing defense, and Perry was still able to close him down and get to him enough to win the decision. With Rockhold, I think he would probably just have overlooked Mike Perry because he's quite a bit smaller. Rockhold's a big welterweight, a big middleweight, and Mike Perry's a small welterweight. So I think he expected to be able to box him on the end of his range and not get hurt too much. And that's just never the case with Mike Perry. It's like fighting a pit bull in an empty swimming pool.
Yeah, Mike loves it. He loves getting hit and loves the feeling of that bare knuckle boxing. There's barrage. Hey, I was going to ask you, because I was when I was watching that and Conor came in the ring, they did that stare down. Got me thinking. Mike did so well against MVP. How would you see a bare knuckle boxing match between him and Conor going? I'm not saying it would ever happen, but it just got me thinking who would win that one.
What bit between Perry and Conor, or between MVP?
Perry and Conor. In bare knuckle.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Mike Perry is he doesn't mind taking damage. He doesn't mind walking through fire. And although Conor, he's willing to do the same thing to a point, he does get slowed down and backed up. And Mike Perry's a bit bigger, a bit more heavily muscled. I just think he'd be able to kind of get to Conor eventually by taking enough damage and wearing it well enough to be able to slow Conor down and get to him. It'd be an absolute banger of a fight, though, and this is really where you would get to see Conor's boxing skills, striking skills on full display, because with no gloves on at all, it's a game of millimeters as opposed to inches, and Conor's always had good defense, but Mike Perry would most likely get to him, and how would he deal with that kind of pressure and damage?
Crazy, man. Crazy times of living, and Mike Perry the biggest winner from the whole weekend, really. Out of curiosity, people see Conor chugging the proper 12, the whiskey and everything, and the memes are like, well, the training camp's going well, we see. We're not going to get the Chandler fight with another 30,000 years. But I was also like, well, let's say he needs 4 months to have a good camp and stuff. That's May, June, July, August. Do you see this as like alarm bells? Like, well, what are you doing, Conor? Why are you drinking so much? Or are you like, they were talking about having the fight in November. Maybe it's not such a big deal.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a bigger game being played because, there's still got to be 6 months of USADA, right? Is he not done a test?
I
feel like there's like an internal battle going on. Conor's kind of flexing his brand within the combat sports world, and basically kind of irritating the UFC enough for him to be able to push him around a little bit and get his way. Like, he has such weight in the sport, in combat sports, and in the general mainstream interest of interest in people, really, that he's able to get away with things. I mean, if anybody else had done that, they'd have been in so much trouble. But Conor will most likely, turn it into a negotiating tool. So we'll see what happens. But I don't see him fighting it in the next 4 months against Michael Chandler, unless we see his name pop up on the USADA website, and someone will spot that, because I bet people are checking that every day for Conor McGregor's name.
And I got to say, like, BKFC, congratulations to those guys, because it was a banger of a show. They played all their cards right. And it reminded me of, like, hey, there is a place out there for some combat athletes if they want to kind of go through what that is. And I mean, who knows? Maybe Conor McGregor is going to become a part owner, because there is after that weekend, everybody loves it. But I understand also him drinking that proper whiskey, because that's him marketing one of his brands, right? Like, he's always going to go out there and do his thing. So I think sometimes people get a little bit too swept up in the theatrics of marketing, of effective marketing. And Conor McGregor was at the Tank Davis fight, doing his thing as well, in Ryan Garcia's change room, no doubt pushing proper 12 there too. So he's just a really great marketer, and sometimes people need to understand that's what he's doing. But unbelievable weekend.
He's probably punking us. He's probably just chugging apple juice all the time.
The thought crossed my mind. Yeah, possible.
He's a very, very shrewd individual. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I was like, Conor switching it for like water or something. Yeah, I don't think so. But then it's within the realm of possibility. All right, just super quick before we get into UFC 2A, one more detour, and that is John Jones versus Stipe or John Jones versus Pavlovich. I'm dying to hear your thoughts, Dan. What do you think? Not how it goes, but just what do you want to see?
I would rather see John Jones Stipe, because I feel like that's a limit. You know, we're on a limited amount of time for that to happen.
Sure.
You know, for John Jones or for Stipe. So if they're both available, we can get them in there. Then let's do it. Pavlovich is going to be around for a while, and I think he's going to get more dangerous as time goes on. I wouldn't mind seeing him, you know, have maybe one more fight and then, you know, being lined up for a title shot. But he's a very scary individual. Of course, there are lots of things that John Jones can put in front of him that he would have never seen before. And I think that's ultimately where John Jones is at with the majority of the division. But the thing that's always stood out at heavyweight is that his wisdom prevails. You know, we've seen heavyweights much later in their career having a lot of success. You know, I mean, Glover Teixeira kind of shows this at light heavyweight as well. But you look at some of the heavyweight division, like Arlovski and you know, Overeem, like they've had. Yeah, Verdum, exactly. Like Overeem's had what, 370,000 fights or something, and you know, every limb's been replaced 6 times. Like wisdom is very, very valuable in the heavyweight division, because the margin for error is much, much narrower. Like if you go down the weight classes, like you can take a few shots and, you know, learn to not put your head in that particular place again before the second round starts. But at heavyweight, you don't get that kind of forgiveness. So I feel like wisdom plays a big part in heavyweight MMA, and I feel like that's where Stipe has an advantage against John Jones, because he knows how to play at heavyweight, and he's very good at kind of, you know, he like hangs back over his rear leg and picks people off, and we know he's got good wrestling. So I would like to see it before it's too late. I don't want it to be like a Mayweather Pacquiao situation. You know what I mean? We never got GSP Anderson Silva, so I don't want to miss this one.
Yeah, and it's getting to the point where it's starting to get a little bit late for Stipe, so hopefully we can get him out there soon. And by the way, shout out to Ben Rothwell from BKFC as well. Someone who I thought had a really good shot at getting up there to a title shot in the heavyweight division, but unfortunately things didn't pan out. Loved the cape and the evil laugh. Good to see him doing his thing in bare knuckle. Now, speaking of UFC 288, Dan, and you know, worthy contenders, Henry Cejudo was back in town, back from the 3-year layoff against Aljamain Sterling. And, you know, this is a super tough test for Aljo. It's a super tough test for anyone. The Triple C machine is a difficult one to sort of decode. How do you think his grappling-focused approach fares against one of the best wrestlers in UFC history, MMA history, in Cejudo?
Well, you know, the thing I like about Aljamain Sterling is it's very difficult to discourage him. You know, he's like, you look at his takedown statistics, and I know these off the top of my head because of my breakdown show recently. Like he's got 24% takedown effectiveness. So that's based on about 115 takedown attempts, but he's very, very persistent. Like if you look back some of his fights, he's 3 takedowns for 15 attempts, or I think it was 2 for 22 against Peter Yan in one of their fights. Like he's very difficult to discourage. And what we've learned from the Sandhagen fight, and to a point from the Cody Stamann fight, when he got that wicked Suluev stretch, is that he doesn't necessarily need to have taken you to the floor to start grappling with you. I think that might be a valuable asset to him in this fight, to be able to kind of expose Cejudo's back and climb up him, as opposed to take him to the mat first. And the other thing we have to remember, and the thing that I keep coming back to, because the truth is, I feel like Cejudo's generally better in striking and wrestling. I mean, pretty clearly wrestling, I think. But I feel like his striking's better. It's cleaner, it's crisper, it's far more considered than Aljamain Sterling's striking. But then, you know, of course, the jiu-jitsu, I would start leaning towards Aljo, because we know he's got a proven ground game, and he's fused it very well with his wrestling. But I think he's going to have to be creative at how he gets there, whether he uses his size, which is one of the main assets that he's got, to wear on Cejudo, force him to wrestle when he really chooses not to most of the time, and then, you know, expose his back up against the fence and climb up him and start trying to choke him out standing. And then again, his size comes into play, especially if Cejudo starts bending forward, trying to throw him off, and you know, the Sulev stretch is there as well.
I also wonder, like, if it stays standing, like, just on that striking, Cejudo striking, how well do you think Aljo can do? Because, like, he's gonna have to be sort of in and out, like the Yarn fight, maybe a lot of stance switching. But like, Cejudo already faced someone who does that really, really well in Dominic Cruz, and like Cejudo's understanding of distance and timing, his fight IQ in general, is just incredible. And the way he baited him in and set him up beautifully for that knee that ultimately ended the fight was just incredible. And even before that, he was cutting his legs out from under him. So you got to think Cejudo's going to be doing a lot of that to Aljo, right? With to try and stop his lateral movement.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I mean, Aljo's advantage on the feet is the fact that he doesn't really have much of a plan. You know, and I'm not saying that in any way to be you know, to discredit his striking, because what I'm learning, you know, as we go along in this sport, the sport's still young, and the element of chaos that he brings to the table, not knowing what he's going to do, also keeps his opponent on the back foot, switching his stance and moving it at odd angles. Like, if you go back to his UFC debut, it doesn't look a great deal different to how he moves now. Of course, he's a little bit more calm and more measured because he's more confident in what he does. But the actual method of his striking has not changed too much. And it is kind of awkward, but he's more interested in making contact with you more times than you make contact with him. It's less of there's less, I'm gonna hurt you with these shots, and more of a touch, you can't touch me. You know, and then if you look at his fight against Pedro Munoz as a good example, or Jimmy Rivera, two guys that had a height and reach disadvantage, they both got stuck right on the outside, like to the point where you could see Jimmy Rivera trapped up against the fence, like, how am I going to close distance? And he'd leap in with a hook, and Aljo was gone. You know, if he's able to put Cejudo in that space where he feels trapped on the outside of his range, then he can pepper him all day, you know, beat him up and chip away at him. But Cejudo's, you know, he learns fast. We've seen several different versions of him. You know, remember the first version when he was a bit more tucked up, you know, Julio Cesar Chavez style boxing, and then the version after his two losses against Wilson Hayes, where he was, you know, more Karate Kid.
Yeah.
It was, you know, there was a clear shift there. But then you also see how he took the knees that were effective in the DJ fight against him and used them against Wilson Hayes. And then same thing with Moraes. You know, he was having problems with low kicks in that fight. He then went in and used it against Dominic Cruz. So he's very, very intelligent. He adapts very quickly. Again, I go back to the same thing, and this is where I see it more as a strength sometimes than I ever have done before. But the uncertainty of Aljamain Sterling striking makes it difficult for Cejudo to plan it. You know, he was able to see patterns in Cruz's movement and striking, so he was able to set him up for the knee. But I don't know if he's going to be able to find the same patterns in Aljo's striking, because there really aren't any. It's really quite chaotic.
And it's interesting because, look, he's taken a bit of a break. He had the layoff. He's coming in at 36. And we've heard Masvidal talking about how, you know, the reflexes and speed sort of betrayed him towards the end of his career. But then you also look at the fact that, look, Henry was able to actually take a bit of a break, give his body a rest. And he's been training some of the best fighters in the world, Demetrius Johnson, Figgy, John Jones. He's been in the game, and it looks like it's given him a chance to sort of look back at his own game and maybe even add some things. What do you think, what kind of Cejudo do you think we see coming in here, and how much do you think the time away and the age might affect what we see in that octagon?
Well, I think the fact that he stayed present, and he's been coaching a lot of high-level people as well as, working with Demetrius Johnson. I think he's going to be sharp, especially his fight IQ. I think whatever he's lost in speed or reaction time, which I think is going to be minimal, especially for someone who's a former Olympian. He's an athlete, he's always lived an athletic lifestyle, and I think even time out, he's probably gained a little bit of body fat, but he's not been he's not been offensive with his body and abusing himself. So I would imagine he's not aged himself too much. And again, it kind of goes back to the heavyweight thing. Like wisdom does play a part in these weight classes as well. I do think it's less of a factor in these weight classes where speed and conditioning is more of a factor. But certainly, with this fight being at bantamweight and not flyweight, I feel like it plays into Cejudo's strength a lot more. He always struggled with flyweight. There were times when he missed the weight class before the UFC, and he made his debut at bantamweight in the UFC. Like this is the right weight class for him, and I feel like we're going to get a more sturdy, powerful performance out of him because he's going to feel healthier in himself because he's not trying to cut himself down to flyweight. And the other thing as well, I think he's picked his moment to come back. I think he will have looked at the fights that Aljo had against Peter Yan, and he will have learnt a lot from them. He will have seen how Peter Yan lost those fights, and he will not do the same things. This is another thing that you have to take into account with Cejudo. Everything you put on the table for him is going to absorb it, and it's going to become a part of his game plan against you. And Aljo's given away a lot. This is something Veronica pointed out the other day, that he's given away so much information on his YouTube channel. I don't know whether he's considered that or not, but Cejudo's like eating that up every day, I'm sure. I'm excited to see what he comes back with. I do think that Aljamain Sterling's a very difficult test for anybody, but I also think Cejudo's picked his moment to come back against the right champion. It's a bit of GSP coming back to fight Bisping. Do you know what I mean? I think there would have been times when GSP wouldn't have come back, depending on who the middleweight champion was. And I kind of feel the same thing with Cejudo. And I ultimately think, if he wins here, he shifts gears and goes straight up and fights Volkanovski at featherweight. I think that's ultimately his plan here.
Good timing.
I think he wants
for that.
Yeah, I just think he wants to. I think he wants to sprint for another 18 months, 2 years, and solidify himself as one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest. If he gets 3 weight classes and a gold medal, my goodness, can you imagine that as an achievement? He would be. How many C's would he have in his nickname then?
C4.
Yeah, he's there you go, quadruple C. But I'm interested to see. Aljamain Sterling's been active. He's big. He's long. He's difficult. He's confident. Difficult to discourage. I've talked enough, but that's what I think.
No, you haven't. You can talk all day. We love it, man. A couple of predictions, but before we get to the prediction of the main event, UFC 288, how much of a chance do you give Sterling against Alex Volkanovski if that fight happened?
I think he struggles against Volkanovski. I think Volkanovski's movement and power would be able to shut him down. The deficits that Henry Cejudo might struggle with against Sterling, I don't think Volkanovski would struggle with. I'm sure he's going to give up height, but what is it? Maybe 3 inches in height, but I don't think he's going to give up any reach. I think there's most likely going to be if not even maybe even an inch advantage for Volkanovski. He's got quite long arms, if I remember right. But I don't know. I just feel like Volkanovski, he's kind of found that groove in his career where he knows what he does. He knows what he does well. Frankie Edgar hit that point at one stage, and so did Aldo. And you just kind of look at them and go, yeah, I mean, they're cruising in 4th gear and no one's anywhere near them. So yeah, I feel like Volkanovski is going to be problematic for anybody up as far as probably middleweight at this stage. But I certainly like to see it.
Yeah. So who are you leaning towards in this one, in Sterling and Cejudo?
I'm leaning towards Cejudo. I'm an optimist, and I think he's going to come back with a much better fight IQ and a much more accurate focus with his game plan, what he needs to do to be victorious against Aljamain Sterling. I think he's very calculated, and I think that's going to pay off in a fight against someone that is just wildly chaotic and can make a lot of bad decisions, put his head in a lot of bad positions for someone that's got good knees. So I'm leaning towards Cejudo, but I am very, very excited to watch it, and I'm quite happy to be proven wrong.
Oh, yeah, so am I, man. Dude, speaking of excited, I'm very excited to never have to worry about my stupid nose hairs or ear hairs ever again in my life. And the same can be said for you guys. Mind your manholes, right? Everybody knows by now, obviously, nose hairs, super, super, super major turn off. Not a good look. And it's annoying when you're driving in traffic and just ripping those guys out. Your eyes are watering. Never have to worry about that again with Manscaped's Weed Whacker 2.0 nose and ear trimmer. The same great technology from the Lawnmower 4.0. You get it here with the 7,000 RPM motor, the improved steel blade system. It upgrades the cutting edge performance from their first generation to better whack your weeds. You got the skin safe technology. It's cordless, rechargeable, battery of up to 45 minutes. You can do it on the go. It just sits in your bathroom or anywhere. You just whip it out, buzz, 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 and you're feeling like a brand new man. Isn't that right, Dennis? And double the aerodynamicness of you now. Isn't that right?
That's right, man. And you get 20% off and free shipping now with the code word submission. Manscaped your life right now and get that sexy discount. Help the show and represent downstairs. Thanks to Manscaped, Cass.
That's right, man. Why are you getting cheeky discounts? Don't forget, man, things cost different in different countries, right? So if you're in Australia, we got an okay currency. If you're in the US, you got an okay currency. But what if you want to pay cheaper for things? You change your geolocation with a VPN like NordVPN, like Dennis did with the NBA League Pass. Didn't want to pay Australian rates. Changes the geolocation to like Philippines or Malaysia. Bang, instant savings. You do the same thing with Netflix. Don't pay US prices, pay Mexican prices. Nice and cheap, right? And also you got Dan Hardy and the boys at BT Sport doing phenomenal work on their coverage, doing stuff for UFC 288 and all the boxing and stuff like that. And a lot of times you can't watch it because it's like the upload has not made this available in your location. Or same thing with like, Twitter highlights for like boxing and BKFC and all that kind of stuff. Never worry about that again. One touch of a button with NordVPN, change your geolocation to that country, the UK, the US, wherever you want. Now you can watch whatever you want and you'll never ever slow down with geolocation. And also the best thing about it, no speed throttling and no buffering. So everything plays at the exact same perfect speed as your internet. And best of all, your internet service provider with NordVPN, your internet service provider can never track the websites or anything that you're looking at. They'll never know. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, man. I am loving the NBA League Pass thanks to NordVPN, and a shout out to all our New York friends. New York Rick, for example, who must be enjoying the playoffs as we speak right now. New York Knicks are making history right now, back in the mix. And you guys can enjoy things like the NBA League Pass, Peacock, Hulu, who knows, whatever you want to watch around the world thanks to Nord right now. With this special deal, you get a massive, massive, huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus 4 additional months for free if you go to nordvpn.com/submission. And by the way, just try it today because it's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Once you try it, you just will not want to go back. But Dan, what about this co-main event between Gilbert Burns and Belal Muhammad coming together at super short notice? What did you make of these guys basically being like, okay, putting up their hand for a super tricky fight last minute, and basically Belal being in this situation when he wasn't really on the UFC's radar for a title shot? They kind of wanted to give him to Shavkat. And now, after this potential fight, could potentially get back on the radar of the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, it's a power move by both of them, I think, to keep himself relevant like this. I feel like the welterweight division is wide open for some contenders, and both of these guys have got good potential. The thing is, Gilbert Burns is kind of in a similar situation to Volkanovski. Obviously not at the elite level just yet, but he might reach that stage at some point at welterweight. But he's found his groove with competition. He's in shape. He's not injured. He's healthy. He's just done 3 rounds against Masvidal. He was quite comfortable striking against Masvidal as well, which surprised me. I thought he was going to try and grapple more. I think this was an interesting fight. I lean towards Gilbert Burns for the simple fact that, Belal Muhammad was really good against Vicente Luque in their second fight. But the thing that allowed him to pressure off the fence was his ability to shoot a double leg. And, even if he wasn't successful with the takedown, he could threaten it. But I kind of feel like that's nullified when you've got Gilbert Burns in front of you, because do you really want to take him down? It takes the option off the table. And Burns' striking's improving all the time, as well as his confidence, which is a big part of striking, success, to be honest. I feel like Gilbert Burns is probably going to be really strong for a couple of rounds, and if he's able to get it done, then he will. But Belal's played a very clever card by making sure this is 5 rounds, because that's ultimately where his strengths come into play. Like, I had a look at his record.
Gilbert asked for 5 rounds. He wanted it the last few fights. They didn't give it to him, and now he's like, I want 5 rounds. How crazy is that?
Oh, is that right? See, I also, that's my mistake then, because I automatically assumed that Belal had done that, because I was looking at their records, and Gilbert's he's dynamic. He's got a few different ways to finish the fight, and I feel like his ability to grapple from top position is going to open up even more striking options in future fights for him. But like Belal, the reason why the UFC aren't really getting behind him too much is because 22 wins and 16 decisions. That's 72% of the time he goes the distance. It's not a healthy stat in today's the modern MMA world, where people want to see Instagram highlight reel finishes, and that's I think that's really where Belal's got to step out of himself here. Even if he has to play this clever for 10 minutes, he needs to be looking for a finish in the last 3 rounds to really make a mark on this division. It's
very like all in, like he's pushed all his chips in, because like you mentioned, like he's undefeated I think in 8 fights, 8 out of 9. So it's like, if the UFC already are like if he's not really on their radar, so to speak, and if he loses, imagine how many fights he's gonna have to win to get to eventually get a title shot, right?
Yeah. But then the thing is, this is where other opportunities presenting themselves to fighters is a good thing, because someone like Belal Muhammad, you can imagine him just kind of losing the will to swim against the tide in the UFC and decide that a meritocracy might be the way to go. Like he could be a $1 million prize winner in PFL if you think about it. Like he's a very, very strong welterweight. You look at him in the mix against the welterweights in PFL right now, he would be right up there as as one of the top contenders. It's unfortunate that the way that it is in the UFC for some fighters, because they do need, like, it's a promotion. The promotion will get behind the most promotable people because they have to do the least work and invest the least money. And Belal makes it hard for the UFC to promote him, because he's not moving those needles. And that again is because he's not really finishing people. His fight against Sean Brady did a lot for him. That was a big finish. It was a really, really impressive win. And I hope that was him shifting a gear up. But I mean, sometimes fighters need to see behind that curtain so they know that there's another level that they can reach. And maybe his time with Khabib was able to, open up his eyes a little bit to, what his actual capabilities are. We might see a whole streak of finishes now, and I might be eating my words, but I certainly think that's what he needs to get the UFC's attention more than anything.
I can't wait for it, man. So many storylines. Belal making weight. I'm sure he will, but that won't be an easy weight cut. Burns, how's he going to be feeling? And then, of course, ultimately, what happens to the winner here? Are they going to get the next title shot after Colby and Leon? And for someone like Belal with that history with Colby and wearing that T-shirt and stuff, if he does win, is there a story there for him to potentially have a shot against Colby as well? Of course, we've got Shavkat, other people in the division. Usman still trying to make his way. So a lot of fascinating stuff. But if you guys want to check out some real fascinating stuff for now, make sure to check out the Dan Hardy Breakdown Show on BT Sports. Of course, The War Room, his book, Part Reptile. And of course, follow the man at Dan Hardy. MMA, of course, full reptile clothing. Amazing stuff as always. Dan Hardy, thank you so much for joining us, man. It's a real honor as always.
Thanks, guys. Always great talking to you.